Hello, it's Jacob Peddicord, and you're listening to Hacker Slacker. We're doing something new again this week. I know you're probably getting tired of hearing me say that, but today we actually have three hosts. We're going to do a little bit of a different format, but our hosts are going to be me, Jacob Peddicord, and...
It's me, Andre Garivay. I'm back again.
And Nick Siscoe.
So yeah, we're all three here. We're going to talk tech for a little bit. The new format for the show is we're going to spend longer episodes, probably hit follow-up news, and then have a main topic at the end. So we'll be doing this once a week. We'll try to record every Wednesday and get it out on Thursday. But yeah, so that's the new format. So to start out, we have some follow-up. So from last week, we talked about how the new iPhones have what's called an eSIM in them. And one of the things that we didn't really mention about the eSIMs is that they could potentially have a really good trickle-down effect for the Apple Watches and potentially what comes after them. So for those of you who don't know, the Apple Watches use an eSIM to get cellular network, and it's currently only supported in 10 countries versus the hundreds of countries where regular SIMs are supported. So Apple putting the eSIM in the iPhone will hopefully get a bunch more countries on board, making it much easier for smaller devices to be connected to cellular data. So this could be big for the Apple Watch and also big for if Apple's making a headset down the line.
And you'll probably remember last week we talked about how Apple is really miniaturizing their hardware and optimizing their software to be able to be used on a possible headset. So it'll be really interesting to see if we'll be able to get a pair of glasses in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, if you look at that Apple Watch and you think about the physical size of a pair of sunglasses, they're really not that far away from being able to split up what's in an Apple Watch right now into a sunglasses form factor. So that would be really cool to see them get out there.
Yeah, especially having, that cellular technology too. I don't know how proprietary that is in terms of other companies being able to latch on and, have some sort of similar SIM system in terms of getting more and more countries on board, that kind of technology. But especially, we've seen how fast the form factors change for smartwatches just in the last 5 to 10 years. So I think, obviously, moving forward, that's a big potential push for Apple.
I think eSIMs is something that is not proprietary to Apple. I'm pretty sure there's Android phones that have them.
Yeah, Google's Project Fi actually uses eSIMs in a lot of countries.
Yeah, so that's Google's cell network, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I know there are a lot of people who will use a Pixel phone, per se, and they'll just use the eSIM. They won't even have a physical SIM. They'll just be on Google's cellular network, and apparently it works pretty well.
Yeah, so with thinking about this, it makes me wonder if Apple purposely put in the eSIM because it doesn't really seem like they've cared about people being able to have two SIM cards in the past. But I wonder if they're really just trying to find a way to push those carriers to get more support for their watches and whatever future devices they make.
For sure. Especially since they can charge more if their other devices are able to have LTE.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So the next thing I wanted to ask is if anybody's pre-ordered any of the devices since the keynote.
I've been working on getting my iPhone XS Max ordered. I think I'm going to do gold. But yeah, I should get that ordered in the next couple of days.
Nice. Okay.
Nice.
I haven't ordered anything. I'm probably going to go to an Apple store and try out the Apple Watch, but we're in Lincoln, Nebraska right now. There's no Apple stores in Lincoln, so I'll have to wait till I go home to KC or next time I'm in Omaha to check them out.
I don't plan on personally purchasing any of the devices, but I really want to see the form factor of the Apple Watch. I don't know how much thinner it is per se, but I mostly just want to see the screen and how improved that thing is.
Yeah, that's one I think could be a real game changer, especially coming from a Series 0 for running, like I said last episode.
Yeah, and I think it's obvious that we knew, obviously it's moving in the direction of the screen filling up more of the watch. If you look at the bezel of the first couple editions, you could see that's where it was going. So obviously it'd be cool to actually see that in action.
Yeah.
This is a little bit of a tangent off of what we had planned, but devices are going far more bezel-less, including watches, and obviously from the new release of the iPhone XR.
Rise of the notch.
Yeah, the
all
notch.
over the place.
The notch and just bezel-less phones in general. What are your guys' thoughts on those?
It's interesting because when I saw the iPhone X come out, I thought, I gotta have that. That screen looks so much better. And I've been using an iPhone 7 ever since the iPhone 7 came out. And it's really not something that hurts me day to day. Is having the screen go to the edge. I feel like it's really aesthetically pleasing to have those thinner bezels, but in actual use, it's not something that bothers me. I don't know.
I would kind of agree that in terms of functionality, at least from my perspective, it feels like, there are a lot of improvements, but hardware-wise in the last 2-3 years, it's not like there's been anything super game changing in terms of functionality from smartwatches. But a lot of the things you see hardware wise, making them thinner, making the screens bigger, like those kind of things are, making the devices more premium and more appealing in general to consumers. And obviously, from the perspective of Apple or Google or smartphone makers, like they're obviously looking to continue to show that, they're advancing their hardware, and, so that obviously they can make more sales and say that they're, pushing the envelope in terms of what they can offer hardware wise.
For sure. We've also seen a lot of mid-tier phone companies create what a lot of people have called iPhone 10 clones, where it's just a bezel-less phone with a notch. And
it was interesting how quickly that happened. Like after Apple had the notch, how quickly that trickled over.
Yeah, there's a good picture I'll put in the show notes. That's like the iPhone 10 compared to all the other Androids released in 2018, and it's like you can clearly see that. To show that you're a 2018 phone, you just add a notch at the top of the screen and push those bezels out a little bit.
Apple just has a huge impact.
One of the things is, though, that the iPhone 10, first off, didn't leak super hard when it came out, especially far before it. And it takes about a 1.5 to 2 years to actually develop the hardware of a phone. So a lot of these companies had to have had the same idea around the same time.
Point, yeah.
Apple just kind of got out there at the beginning.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess that makes sense because the lead times on these devices, but I guess everyone was just kind of going to the same place.
I wonder if that was a technological limitation, like that it was just at that point that became possible, or if that was just, everyone was scouting out what everyone else was doing, and that's how that came to be.
I'm pretty sure it has to do with OLED screens, right? Like you're able to wrap the display drivers around the corners, so you're able to push it closer and closer, but...
Right, so that OLED technology has just taken off recently.
What's interesting in the 10R is that they did it with an LCD screen, which has not been able to be done by any mid-tier
company. Was that the liquid retina or whatever?
Yeah, we talked about that last week, how it's basically just a fancy word for a worse screen.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting too, how they tried to market that as being like the more colorful iPhone. Obviously, it's kind of like their, was it the 5C in the past? Uh-huh. And how they were advertising is like, oh, this is a sweet, colorful screen.
All the commercials are a bunch of colorful phones flying everywhere.
Right, and it's like, well, if you actually compare the screen to, the 10S, like, no, it's not better. But
the 5C of the new generation.
Yeah. I'm sure it'll sell just fine. They're really good with marketing, so.
All right, on to the news. One article that I saw that I found really interesting is that Amazon has opened their second cashier-free Go store in Chicago. They have one in Seattle right now, and now that they have opened this one in Chicago, they have two.
Nice. Aren't they planning on opening more, too, for at least slated this year? I'm pretty sure.
I believe so.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, from their perspective that those things are necessarily very profitable at this point, but obviously, like, the more stores that get out in different cities, like, just the more feedback they get, the more data they collect, and I'm sure that's obviously just good for their long-term growth.
Yeah, I wonder if it's almost more of a branding thing than it is an actual profit.
They don't need to profit off of a brick-and-mortar store. The article does say that they have a store in New York and San Francisco on the way. So, 2 big tech cities that will be getting Amazon Go stores. I actually visited the Go store in Seattle this past summer, and it was really a very unique experience. You just walk in, you tap your app on a scanner, it lets you right in. You just kind of walk around. You can pick things up, set them down. It watches you as you go around. You have to make sure that if you pick something up, you set it back, and you can only hold one thing at a time, or it has to go in your basket. Otherwise, some of the software can mess up. What I did find interesting is that you can tell that they really don't care about profiting, because once you've made the purchase, about 10 to 12 minutes later, it will go on your app and it'll say, hey, you've been charged for whatever you purchased. Say you bought a Coca-Cola. It'll say, hey, you bought this Coca-Cola. We charged your Amazon account for it. But there's also an option to just say, I didn't buy that, and get your money back. So
yeah, I've heard that I don't know if it's that they haven't figured it out or they just don't care at this point. A system for, someone disputing or saying, I didn't purchase that. I'm sure, like, I would have to expect that they have some sort of limit. Like, if you try to go in their store and do that 3 separate times, that they would say, no, you've tried this before. But I'm not sure if that's, you're allowed to do that indefinitely.
It's the same policy they have on their e-commerce website, right? Like, you can just say you got screwed over on Amazon and return the item, and they'll give you a refund.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure, like, once you like reach a suspicious amount of refunds.
Or if
they'll
you do
start
something with a
working.
really high value item, they
Yeah.
might, you know.
And I mean, there is cameras everywhere in the store, so I'm assuming like they can go back and check
Yeah.
and double check you if
Mhm.
you're like, oh, this guy's keeps getting a bunch of things, but none of
Guy
them are
keeps
his.
buying some Coke and just
Yeah.
takes it right. Yeah.
Yeah, one really interesting thing about it is you walk in and then you just look up and it's all cameras. There's no real ceiling. You're just kind of surrounded by cameras. It feels kind of like you're in 1984, just grocery shopping. There are human employees there, and it's right next to the Amazon Visitor Center in downtown Seattle. But it is a very unique experience, and now people in Chicago will be able to have that experience too.
Yeah, the whole being next to their visitor center, and that all makes it sound like it's definitely a huge branding thing, like trying to get people excited about Amazon's technology, which, I mean, a store without cashiers, it's definitely worked. Like, they got a lot of press for this.
For sure. Next story I found really interesting is that there was a Samsung Galaxy Note 9 that spontaneously caught fire in a woman's purse this month.
They just never learn their lesson, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, it was the Note 7, right? That they recalled it because they were all exploding in people's houses and in their hands and in their pockets.
That was a huge negative PR thing for them. I mean, pretty much every major news outlet took that story.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
their stock price took a massive hit. Their engineers were telling the designers that, hey, this isn't going to work. Like, these batteries are too compact, but they kept pushing the
Yeah,
limits.
and I don't remember the fallout of that. Didn't they basically just recall like all Note 7s and just stop selling them indefinitely?
They deprecated it. They sent out a software update that you could not deny that just bricked your phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically a bomb defusal update.
Yeah. It was after the FAA banned the Note 7 from all commercial airplanes.
That would really suck. You're just out and about, and it's like, well, here's the update. Like,
Yeah.
nothing you can do about it.
So, I mean, it's kind of funny that, I mean, I'm sure the people in the Samsung headquarters are freaking out seeing this. It looks like what they're saying is that they haven't received similar reports and that this was a freak accident, but, I mean, obviously everyone's on edge for this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Especially since battery technology is getting more powerful every generation and devices are getting more compact on the internals every generation. So they did improve their battery inspection process after the Note 7 fiasco. So hopefully this is the only time that that'll happen. And the final news story we're going to talk about is the one that probably the most people have heard about in the past week, and that is that SpaceX has had an announcement recently that they will be sending Japanese billionaire Yusaku Maezawa into space.
So, from what I just saw like a quick tweet about this, but basically he's a Japanese artist who's a billionaire, and he's doing this whole. It's basically like not an art exhibit. It's like an art expedition where they're like going out to the moon with a bunch of artists. They're going to be recording music, painting, a bunch of stuff like that. Is that what's going on?
Yeah, he said he's going to invite 6 to 8 artists to join him around the moon, and in as early as 2023, they will take a trip around the moon, and he will have them all create some sort of art once they come back.
And I don't know how much you know about SpaceX, but would this be the first mission for the BFR, or?
I believe so, but
Yeah.
I'm not completely sure on that.
Okay, yeah. It'll definitely be interesting. I mean, SpaceX finally getting someone out in at least moon orbit, as they're like, I mean, that's the catapult to Mars, right? Don't you go around moon when you're trying to go to Mars? I think you do.
Yeah. So that'll be an interesting thing to see how that develops. SpaceX has said in previous years that they will send people to the moon. They never actually named a specific person, and now they have named this billionaire. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes.
I'm curious, did they say anything about, what the billionaire's paying for it, like in terms of numbers wise, or if he's paying at all?
I actually don't know about that. I don't think they said anything on the actual payments he will be making or if he will be paying for it.
I would have to think that'd be an expensive flight.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm imagining he's paying some big hefty ticket to get this done.
Right.
I mean, otherwise they wouldn't have picked a billionaire. They would have picked
They would have picked, yeah, exactly.
An astronaut.
yeah.
Someone who actually could go to the moon, and yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
Okay, so for the main topic today, we're going to be talking about our internships from the last summer. So we're all sophomores at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and we spent our last summers working for companies. And we all worked at different companies just for the summer. And it was our first internship, so they were pretty interesting experiences. I worked at a company called Cboe Global Markets. It's based out of Kansas City, and it's a stock exchange. Nick worked for a small startup in Kansas City called PayIt, and Andre worked at another small startup you might have heard of called Google. So we're just going to go around the circle and each kind of explain our experience and then let the other people ask questions about it. So I'll start out. So Cboe Global Markets is a stock exchange. You probably haven't heard of it. They're pretty famous they've got a lot of success off of high-frequency trading clients. If you look at it by volume, they're actually the second biggest stock market in the U.S., so they're right up there competing with the stock markets you've heard of like NYSE and NASDAQ. And actually in the UK, they're the first biggest in the equities markets. And Cboe is actually the company that invented the options, so if you've ever heard of puts or calls, that was them. The VIX is their product. They're pretty big in the finance industry. And they actually have an office in Lenexa where a lot of their technology is based out of, Lenexa, Kansas. So it was really cool because it was like 5 minutes from where I'm from in Kansas City. So my commute was super short. The team that I was on was the web team. So I was working on a project for the new operations team in Chicago to help test their markets. There's not a ton of specifics I can go into, but it was a web application, and I really liked their culture there, and it was, I would say probably one of my biggest benefits is code quality. A code quality at a stock exchange is something that I don't really know if it compares to many other places, because, I mean, if you have code crash on the matching engine, the thing that actually makes the trades, that's literally like billions of dollars being moved around a day, and obviously that's not the level of code I was writing, but it's the type of culture that I was writing code in, so I definitely improved my testing, my code quality, that sort of thing over the summer.
Yeah, based on what you've told me about it, seems like a really cool opportunity. And I'm curious what kind of mentorship they had in terms, because you talked about code quality. I'm sure that's really important at a stock exchange. What kind of oversight was there in terms of making sure you were on track with your project and keeping track of your code?
Yeah, so my team, the web team, was about 13 people, and the people who were directly working with me was my manager and then my mentor. So I did have a mentor assigned to me. He was a younger guy, and he would kind of just be the person I would call if I ever had a small question. He would usually help me faster than Google, so there's a lot of questions specific to their stack that I could ask him. Yeah. Yeah, so anytime I had a question specific to their technology, it was really easy just to ask them, and they spent a lot of time with us. And then our manager was kind of obviously the project manager for the project, so he set up the requirements and gave us some deadlines to hit and kind of got us going. And we tried to do code reviews at the end of every major feature, so that's where a lot of our code quality came in, was sitting down and going through our code line by line and just getting it ripped to shreds. So
is that how often would you say you did that? Bi-weekly or?
It was probably every 1.5 weeks. So it kind of depended on how long the feature took. When we were building out the first couple features, they took forever. But as we got more and more used to the system, we were able to move faster.
Nice.
But yeah, the code reviews were definitely one of the best learning experiences for me, something I didn't really expect.
And what would you say was the main drive for you to want to work at Cboe over the summer?
So, last summer, my opportunities were kind of local to Kansas City and Lincoln because that's the types of people that come to our career fair. And I knew Cboe had a really good reputation from the interns that came before me there. There was one guy who worked there from our school before me, and he always talked so highly about their culture, so I wanted to check it out. And then at a board meeting for our school, I met the CTO, and he was a really good guy. He seemed like he had a really good head on his shoulders, so it just got me more interested in the company. And the more people I met, the more people I liked. And eventually I just decided it's really close to my house, so it'll be nice to live at home again one more summer. And then it ended up being a good fit. So
cool. Nice.
Cboe, they did the opening of Bitcoin futures, right?
Yeah, so they were actually the first company to launch Bitcoin futures. It was I think it was a month or so before I got there. But yeah, it was heavily contested because them and CME, their competitor in Chicago, were racing to see who could launch it first, and they both took different approaches. And no one's really sure who's out on top yet, but I'm afraid it's probably going to be CME. But it's kind of funny. The Cboe, the way they did their Bitcoin futures, they paired with a single exchange to have a single point of truth for the price of Bitcoin to base the futures off of. And they paired with Gemini, which is actually run by the Winklevi, the people from the social network and Facebook who sued Mark Zuckerberg. So
they made quite a lot of money when Bitcoin was at its peak.
Yeah, I heard a little bit about
I wonder if they sold any of that.
Yeah, so they did a really cool thing where we got to take a trip to Chicago and talk to the upper management at Cboe, and it was interesting, like, hearing the CEO talk about the Winklevi and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, who would have thought? But yeah, the Bitcoin futures wasn't something I worked on at all, but it's just kind of something that they were doing to try to stay at the forefront of technology. And obviously they've been trying to get everyone's trying to get Bitcoin ETFs going. They've had one that's been rejected like 3 times, but they're really trying to get that through. That could be huge. But yeah, the other big problem that they're having right now is actually Brexit. This is it was kind of interesting when I heard about this, because this isn't something you would really think of as a consequence of Brexit, but they operate their exchange out of London, which is able to serve the whole EU. But when Brexit hits, London can no longer serve the whole EU because it'll be in the UK. So they're like just kind of having to they debate between maybe building a new exchange in Amsterdam and running a new physical location there, or just giving up on the UK entirely. And the solution that they ended up with was actually to serve 2 different markets out of a single building in London. So it's like 2 venues, 1 server. So like if you're Goldman Sachs and you're trying to make a trade in the UK and the EU, you have to have 2 accounts, even though your accounts are living on the same machine. But it's just like all these like knock-on effects of Brexit. So I was there a lot of times where it's like, oh, this Brexit news was announced, and everyone's like, oh, maybe that means it won't happen, and then we won't have to do all these tickets that we don't want to do. It's like we got all this work stacked up, and everyone's just trying to get out of it. But
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So a big part about being a tech intern is the work, but another thing that is, to a lot of more people when they look at tech intern culture and consider it a very sexy thing to be doing, is all of the perks that you can have as a tech intern. You want to talk about some of your perks?
Yeah, I mean, in Kansas City, it's not the San Francisco stuff you would expect, but I was in a glass office with a bunch of really nice features, full snacks, or a full snack bar anytime I wanted, cater lunch from local restaurants. So, I mean, we had Oklahoma Joe's in there, famous Kansas City barbecue a couple times. I mean, that was nice. And then just crazy perks was this is the last year they're going to sponsor the Crown Club at the Royals game, so I got to sit in the 3rd row for most of the Royals game.
Remember watching on TV during that game?
Yeah. I was waving to a bunch of people, so I was like 3rd row, right on camera the entire time, and then the last inning I slid down to the 1st row. That was definitely a once-in-a-lifetime experience, getting to watch a Royals game from the 1st row, watch them win in the bottom of the 9th. But yeah, that was cool. And then the other thing was that trip to Chicago I talked about, where we went up there to kind of meet the leadership of the company, but also give presentations on what we've been working on that summer. So it was really rewarding, like having to kind of present myself at that level. And it was my first business trip and my first time in Chicago, so it was really cool getting to see all that.
Yeah, nice. That's cool.
All right, Nick, so you interned at PayIt.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with how I got connected. So I was looking into, some sort of internship in Kansas City, mostly just wanting to live at home, for a summer and, live with my parents and not have to pay too much money living somewhere else. And I was looking around, and I knew that I was really interested, obviously, in startups, and I happened to stumble across an article about this company called PayIt, and looked into their website, and I thought the work they were doing was pretty cool, and I basically, they didn't have any open positions on their site. I just went to their support page and sent them an email, and the CEO responded the next day, and he was like, hey, well-written email, let's have a Google Hangout and talk or something. So yeah, that's how I got connected. So PayIt, they are a government technology company. They have about 20 engineers right now. I think 45 employees in total. And basically what they do is they're working on a platform for basically making it easier for citizens across the country to have better access to government services. So their ultimate vision is you can go on the App Store and download a PayIt app, basically. And wherever you live, you load up on your phone, and you'll have access to all the government services that are relevant to where you live. So you go on your phone, and for your city, you have access to water and utility bills, paying those and managing billings, managing your trash pickup, property taxes. At the state level too, within the same app, you'd have access to registering for a new vehicle renewal or your driver's license. So basically, from their perspective, they're having to go to every single government department and sign individual contracts to like basically flesh out what this dream of theirs, which is having all your government services in one app. So in terms of the work that I actually did there, I was the only intern for the majority of the summer. There was someone that came in that was on a trimester from Northwestern about halfway through. But I was basically just put on one of the full-time development teams and was kind of thrown into it. I can't say I was very experienced at the beginning of the summer or knew that much at all. They all develop in React for the most part, and so a lot of front end of that, and then Mongo in the back end. And I had no idea what I was doing for a lot of the summer, but I think it was just a really cool opportunity because I was basically just full-time on one of the teams, and being a full-time team member meant taking on a lot of responsibilities that I don't think other interns necessarily have. And so I was able to learn a lot by just doing things firsthand and being thrown right into the sprints with, all the other employees. And so even if at the beginning of the summer, I couldn't really contribute to some of the bigger things on a sprint, even just like seeing the kind of stuff they're working on, taking part in, sprint planning and stand-up meetings, like all that was really valuable to see like what a full-time employee actually does. So ultimately a really cool experience.
So how did you like working at like such a small company? Like how many developers are there?
Yeah, so there was like 20 engineers, I think. I knew that I obviously thought it would be cool to work at a startup. I didn't really know what it would actually look like when I got there. And for all I knew, basically like PayIt could have failed by the time summer rolled around. Like I had no idea. It turns out when I got there, like PayIt's like really growing quickly and is like a really like actually doing pretty well. And so that like honestly I just got lucky in that respect that it's like a really fast growing company. But like working in a small environment was cool. It's not like a super glamorous office, obviously, like Cboe or Google, I'm sure. And it's pretty rudimentary in that respect, but we have like all the, technology and stuff we need. We have like snacks and catered lunches and things like that most other companies, like most of their tech companies, would offer. But it was just really cool, like I said, to be like hands-on, and it wasn't like I was working on like a project. Like most of the code that I wrote, in fact, all of it is like currently used by PayIt and by city and state governments like around the country. And so it's cool that like even for like the first week that I came in, I was like writing code that people were using, even when I didn't really know what I was doing at the beginning. So just having that kind of impact was really cool.
Would you recommend people who are interested in like that similar type of job, like a small company like that, do the same thing you did where you just kind of email as many people as you can, like see what's interesting?
Yeah. I definitely think some of the best experiences you'll get from a startup, or some of the best companies you'll find, are not necessarily going to be out there marketing themselves to potential interns, because they're super focused on growth and they're super focused on building really good products. And so they don't really spend much time, putting out applications and finding interns, because interns are not really at the top of their priority at that point. So the more you can do to make connections and, just reach out and be really proactive about it, like the better off you are in finding a really cool opportunity like that. Because otherwise you wouldn't necessarily find those.
So you said you had a hangout with the CEO. Were you able to develop a pretty good relationship with him over the summer?
Yeah, it was really cool, actually. So the CEO is John Thompson. He basically started out working at Cerner, actually, right out of college, and he said he made like $30,000 a year. And he worked his way up from support, basically, to an executive position at Cerner, and then decided to leave Cerner for another endeavor before starting PayIt. And I got coffee with him a few times and talked to him about his experience. And it was really cool, like, just being able to be really open with everyone in the whole company, like CEO, CTO, all the product managers, all the business people. Because especially in a startup, like, everything that everyone is doing is really connected because we're all working like on a lot of the same things. So having really open communication with everyone about like things we're working on and goals, and even talking about like personally, like what my goals are long term. It was really cool to be able to have the opportunity and be really hands-on and get to know everyone. So yeah, really cool experience.
Are you thinking about going back next summer or a similar size company?
Yeah, I'm actually, I'm really considering going back. I think another thing that I'm interested in is potentially working at more of a like mid-sized startup, because I think, obviously at my age, it's good to like get experiences that are a little different. So maybe a more established startup in terms of like having, maybe 100 to 200 employees, just like try something a little different. But like PayIt was a really cool opportunity, and I am definitely not opposed to going back there. For all I know, they'll have a new office, and because they are packed to the brim in there right now.
Yeah, double the team size by the time you get back there.
Yeah, so apparently a week before I got there, they had to tear down a wall and buy out an office space that was adjacent to it. And they, over that period of time in the summer, they are already they have filled up that entire space, and there's no, like, you can't even walk around anymore. So they're going to have to they don't even have parking anymore. People were like, I had to park like multiple blocks away, and I had to walk like 10 minutes just to get there, because there's no parking it was in downtown Kansas City at the crossroads.
So speaking of Kansas City, both of you are from Kansas City and worked there this past summer. It's a much less traditional tech city, but it does have a pretty thriving tech industry. What's it like actually working in that industry?
It's interesting because a lot of the big names in tech aren't necessarily like great names like to work for. Like there's Cerner, and a lot of people complain about working there, and then other than that, there's no other like super employers.
I think a lot of the companies are like really like enterprise, or like there's a lot of healthcare, and a lot of like big industrial tech.
Yeah,
kind of companies.
A lot of the tech workers in Kansas City are working at these non-tech companies, and that can kind of be a worse experience than finding something like PayIt, where it's like a technology company. But there is probably a handful of startups that are like really top of the line, kind of innovating in their industry, disruptors kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the stuff you see in like Silicon Prairie News and that kind of stuff.
Kansas City's a really cool city, and honestly, like I'm kind of surprised that. Like if you look at some of the really cool software companies that have offices around the country, a lot of those, like they might have offices in St. Louis or Denver or, other, cities like that. And then I don't know what it is, but Kansas City isn't necessarily like, whether that's because there isn't anyone established there yet or not.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really feel like there's that kind of, there's not really offices in Kansas City for those kind of companies.
I think one of the big struggles for Kansas City is their tech talent. And I mean, it's kind of a knock-on effect, so people say that there's not enough VC money there as well, but when you look at the regional colleges, there's no crazy top-of-the-line school that's recruiting computer science kids from out of state. Like, KU and K-State are good schools, but you're not going to get like a kid from Michigan.
And it's also kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, if you don't have those cool companies coming to Kansas City, you're not going to have like really good talent wanting to go there, which means that no more companies would want, So I don't know, but
yeah, it's the same thing all of the Silicon Valley of the Midwest are trying to solve.
Right. So I guess we should move on to talking about Google, which I'm sure was a vastly different experience probably than what we had, but I'm sure you can tell us a little bit about it.
For sure. So I was an engineering practicum intern at Google in Mountain View, California, at their headquarters this summer. The engineering practicum is for first and second year engineering students who want to have an experience working on a team. So I worked with one partner over the course of a summer to work on a feature, and I was on the Pixel software experience team, so I worked on the settings application in Android for the Pixel phone. Hopefully in the next few months I'll be able to talk more extensively about what I did.
Yep.
But I worked in Mountain View. I lived in South San Jose, which was quite a commute. So my commute was about 45 minutes to an hour each way.
Ouch. I thought 30 minutes was bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was definitely the big tech city experience. I had to get up early every morning. I had to commute to work. I got to work, but being at Google was really just a super awesome thing because they have such a great support system because it's such a huge company.
Right.
My teammates were wonderful. I got to talk to some really great other interns. There were about 1,500 interns on campus while I was there. So
wow.
It's like more than both of our companies put together.
Yeah.
Oh, way more. Yeah.
So I met so many more interns, and it was a lot of fun being able to just hang out with other interns on the weekends, go hiking, go to the beach. And then I got to work in an environment where if you mess up, it's okay because it's probably a pretty small mistake in the grand scheme of Google, as long as you're not like shutting down ads and breaking YouTube.
Yeah.
So you can make mistakes, and the code reviews are done by top-of-the-line engineers. You get to meet some really great people, and you just make some really great connections. One awesome connection I made was with Jeff Dean, who is a Google Fellow. He is the head of all of Google's AI and research, and thankfully through connection here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, I was set up with the other Nebraska interns there to have lunch with him. And so we got about 10 interns together, and we all had lunch with Jeff Dean, and we got to really hear some amazing insight into the world of technology. And as a note, Jeff Dean has been at Google since the month I was born. So
Nice.
He's been there quite a while.
He knows Google.
Yeah. So he's been there quite a while. He deserves the position he's in, and he was absolutely brilliant. Being able to meet such great people, I got to see, about every other week, I got to see Larry and Sergey get up on stage and do an internal meeting for the company. And I got to talk with Jeff Dean. I got to talk with a bunch of engineering directors. I got to see the release of Android Pie, which I had worked on. So it was a really great experience overall.
Cool.
Yeah, that's crazy. So I know, like, one of the crazy things about Google is the food situation. When I was there visiting, they had a bunch of these, like, food trucks parked outside that were for Googlers only.
Yeah.
They had cars that were for Googlers only, like just some of the crazy benefits that you guys have.
Yeah, so I ate at a food truck about 3 or 4 times a week for lunch. I would usually grab a quick breakfast in the morning, take that to my desk. Then I'd take about an hour and a half for lunch, sometimes with my team, sometimes with other interns, whoever I really saw around campus. My office was thankfully between 2 of the best spots for food trucks. So the food trucks kind of rotate around certain spots, but they're always in the same spots. So I was between 2 of those spots, and I was able to go between those ones. There was this really, really great food truck called Soul Skillet Chicken and Waffles, my favorite meal I had all summer. So I ate at a lot of food trucks, and there were probably, in my building and the 3 directly connected to it, there were 3 cafes. And then there were 2 cafes in a couple of buildings about a block away, and just endless cafes across the whole campus. Yeah. So, yeah, the perks are incredible. I got to go on a night boat cruise on a Friday night in San Francisco. We went around the San Francisco Bay. It was one of the most fun times I've had. We were just on a boat. There was a dance floor. There was blackjack. It was so much fun. We were just on a old-timey cruise ship for a night with 1,000 other interns.
Wow, that's crazy. Nice. So you mentioned you worked with a partner, and you said, so you were part of a team and then worked with someone else in particular on your feature, or
Yes.
How does that work? Okay.
Yeah, so you get paired with one partner in the EP program. You get paired with one partner, and you will work with them throughout the entire summer to push whatever project it is you're working on. Mm-hmm. So we got ours done a little early, and then we worked on separate projects after that. But it was a really great experience being able to work with a partner, because we kind of started out trying to do the same thing at the same time. Then we realized that's a bad way to make software. So he worked on the back end. I worked on the front end. Once we met in the middle, it took a little working together to make sure all of the data types matched up, make sure all of the methods worked with each other. But we got it all put together in about 9 to 10 weeks of the 12-week internship. So it was a really great experience, and we became really good friends.
Cool.
How did you like the team that you were with, like the adults? Were they people that you could see yourself being when you're older? Is that the type of role you want?
Absolutely. I will say one of my direct managers graduated college 2 years ago. So pretty young guys
Wow, yeah.
that I worked with. But the corporate structure at Google is very much structured. So I had a few engineers, and then there was an engineering manager above them and an engineering director above them. And I got to meet all of those people. I became good acquaintances with the engineering manager. I would call myself friends with my managers that I worked with, who are engineers themselves, but they were really great guys. I still keep in contact with them. We would go have lunch quite often. They had a lot of really good insight on how to continue going through college, seeing as I had only gone through 1 year. So it was a great way to receive mentorship.
Cool. And were those those managers, were they in sort of a position as like a team lead where they are doing development like alongside people, or were they more like a product manager, like overseeing a project?
So my direct managers were actually just engineers on my team.
Okay.
All they did was engineering. I did work with a project manager, and I did get to talk to him a lot too. So I kind of got the best of both worlds when I wanted to know about what project managing is like in the corporate structure of Google, as well as being a full-time engineer.
Nice.
Do you have any big tips for people who are trying to get the same job you had?
I would say try to find out who the Google recruiter is at your university. Always look online. There's a website, google.com/students. Very easy to find. Look at all the resources there. And applications are up for next year's EP right now until Halloween of 2018, and that's for summer of 2019.
Nice. So what was your experience like getting the job? I know you did something the summer before, right? Is that where you got your return offer?
So I was a part of the Computer Science Summer Institute in the summer of 2017, right after I graduated high school. I went out to Seattle for 3 weeks in July. I learned some computer science. I got to meet 29 other students who were there, and I was able to work with full-time engineers. I was able to meet those engineers and also some recruiters. I had a little bit of an in going into it, so I was able to know what Google was like. I knew that's where I wanted to be. So I had that was the only experience I had coming into college, was the Computer Science Summer Institute. And then I knew a few internal people who would be able to vouch for me and my abilities, which was definitely helpful, but it's for sure not impossible to get that internship after your first or second year of college.
Nice. Do you think you'll go back?
I actually already signed a return offer.
Oh, nice.
Is it for the same team?
I have not picked a team, but I did get an email from my old team and my old manager saying they would like me back, so I might consider going back to that team.
Nice. Yeah, I know there's a couple other students who are on that train where they keep writing those return offers, hopefully all the way to a full-time job out there.
What does that process look like for choosing a team? Is that like, I mean, I don't even know. There's probably tons of teams you can choose from, but...
Yeah, so teams haven't actually been approved quite yet, because a team has to submit their intern project to the interns team, and then that has to be approved, and then they'll project match the interns. So as an
okay,
EP,
so an individual team will get together and say, well, we could have an intern work on this project, and then they suggest that. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and then when you are the intern, you just fill out a survey. They give your information to the teams. The teams look through interns that they may want, and then they'll give you a call. You talk. If it works out, then you can join that team.
Nice.
Nice. So did you have like an on-site interview when you were applying last year?
I did not. I had 2 phone interviews over winter break, actually. So I did it in my own room at my desk, just kind of sat at home, hoping my little brother wouldn't come yelling while I was trying to do my technical interview. But yeah, I had 2 45-minute interviews that went pretty well.
Over winter break, huh?
Obviously, it went all right.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans if it didn't work out? Because obviously winter break's pretty late for...
It was pretty late. I had actually already been denied from the 3 other internships that I had applied for. So Google was pretty much my last bet. Thankfully, It worked out, because otherwise I would have been scrambling to find some sort of startup here in Lincoln.
Yeah.
All right, so now we've talked about all we can talk about on summer internships. I'm sure we'll remember something and we'll have a follow-up next week. But until then, it's been a good time, and we'll see you next time.